Did you know that in many leading economies, the average 70-year-old is as fit today as someone in their 50s 20 years ago? Retirement is changing, and so are the things retirees are spending their money on. Humans may be getting older, but we're also far stronger, healthier, and more employable than we once were. Does that mean we'll all be working till we're 85, Katie?
Well, as long as people want to, that's their choice. But of course, they have to plan for that.
I'm Morton-Clark, and this is Fidelity Answers, the series where we tackle the burning questions investors are asking of the people managing their money. And this month, how should we reimagine investing for an ageing world? Katie Roberts is Global Head of Client Solutions here at Fidelity. Katie, longevity is a buzzword amongst the investors that you're talking to at the moment. And perhaps it's code for a world where the proportion of people reaching retirement dwarfs the pension systems that it was originally designed for. So when you say planning, can you boil that down? Can you boil the challenge down for us a bit?
So, of course, we have, as many people know, pretty much an ageing population everywhere, and the countries impacted by that, go up year by year by year. But thinking about longevity is all about optionality, choice, and flexibility. So if we turn that into what individuals want to do as they go through their different life stages, we can't predict what we will want to do when we're 25 by the time we're 40 or 60 or indeed 80, which is what we're talking about. And so creating optionality to make those choices when you're ready to make those choices is all about planning, and planning as early as possible, and keep reviewing those plans as you move forward.
Well, we've got a crack panel with us today to talk about that and more. Nick Palmarini is the head of the National Innovation Centre for Ageing, a UK think tank dedicated to researching the impact of ageing on society, and he's just done some new research with Fidelity on how people are thinking about retirement. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
And Julianne Ashcroft, who is a Fidelity portfolio manager who spends her days working out how to make money from these changes to the economy that a relatively older population brings. So you're very well versed in what's ahead. Hello to you.
Hello.
Nick, if I could start with you, what's your response to what Katie's just laid out there, that sort of challenge that we face as an ageing population?
It's the first time in history that we have 5 generations living, working, voting together. We are different from where we were before. It's true that a 70-year-old could resemble like a 50, but it has 20 years more of experience. And that experience means being together with other people, have experimented new technologies, new ways of buying things, for example, eating things. So think of how these things are changing our perception, our desires, how we see the future, and where I think it lies the opportunity to understand better what could be these desires and then better serve ourselves in our process of aging.
Julianne, you're obviously focused on thinking about the investment side of some of these themes. So, and the themes around longevity and the impact of that. So how do you think about this?
So we really try to distill down the research into investable ideas, and so we can build a diversified portfolio that can deliver in different market conditions as well. And we really sort of focus down on 3 idea channels. The first one being that the direct impact of changing demographics, so the health and financial wellness, and there's quite a broad range of investable ideas there. The lifestyle drivers, we're all living this, we're all thinking about longevity, whatever age we are, as Nick highlights. And so we can think about the ideas that are supporting longevity, as well as, and we can't avoid this, the growing consumer base of the ageing population. And it is considerable, and we find that demographic really have a willingness, a sort of a capability as well to consume products and services that really enrich their lifestyles. So that's another area of focus. And then the third idea channel is the planet, the longevity of which is absolutely vital for our own longevity. So when we think about that, it's energy transition, it's clean air, clean water, green fuels, electrification, which is obviously a big area of focus, but it's also our immediate environment. And this is where it becomes more challenging from an investment perspective. the importance of our immediate environment and our overall health and well-being is very important.
There's a whole treasure trove of investment ideas and themes there, which we'll get into in a bit. First, let's just take a bit of a step back and hear from our global head of macro, Salman Ahmed, who we talked to earlier about what longevity means for him as an economist.
Just to give you some sense of the numbers, in Europe, for example, by 2030, we are going to get another 3.4 million decline in the working age population. Already since 2002, the share of over 60s has increased by 28 million. So this number is going to go towards a more exponential path. And then on top of that, immigration is slowing down across the world, and that has been a very important. From economics perspective, has been a very important force in terms of keeping population growth intact, keeping that working age share, especially of prime age between 15 and 60, at a suitable level. Most of the growth in immigration in the US and Europe, more so over the last 15, 20 years, has been immigration driven. So now that trend is changing, we also have to think about how will the systems, as you were sharing, cope? And this is, of course, has implications on pensions, consumption patterns, but also the role of technology, I think, and AI, which is obviously becoming a very important dynamic in itself, which may have long-term horizon impact.
Salman Ahmed there, mapping out some of the demographic future. You can hear the full interview with Salman, which we've also published alongside this podcast. Nick, one thing we should probably address is that life expectancy is not actually rising now as fast as it once was. Is there a chance that we're overplaying this idea of everyone living a lot longer?
Yeah, I think you're referring to a paper that came out on Nature almost a year ago, and it was referring to the radical life extension as it was a sort of a prediction in the past 10 years, but literally we're slowing down from that perspective, which I think it's happening from several factors. There's some pandemic, for example, in the UK, obesity is one of these pandemic that are still harming some countries. Also, I think we have to think about the differences in life expectancy, Western versus the rest of the world. And there are some areas of the world where it's not 85 or 90 like it could be in some of the European countries, for example. Think about Africa. So the average is 70. If you look backward, and that's what the study did, it's just on a statistical progression that looks like that we're slowing down. It seems to be implausible that we'll reach, let me say, such a plateau. However, the same document says something quite important. All these considerations are net of all the technological evolutions, are net of the fact that Google basically is winning one Nobel Prize solving equations that have been unsolved so far every year, net of the progression of AI that we literally don't know yet how fast, how big, how deep will be.
Is it helpful to think about, the life expectancy is one thing, but obviously the healthiness, how healthy we are as we get to that stage in life is also really important.
If you switch to a longevity society where we are just, entering right now, you don't measure anymore the life expectancy. You measure the healthy, adjusted life expectancy, meaning that the values are very different there. For example, we know that women are living longer, but we also know that women are living longer, but not healthier, which I think tells us a lot about how much work we have to do in also making a difference on how we prepare for the future. If you're a woman or a man, if you're living in a certain postcode or another, these are the things that I guess we should have to start looking more deeply.
What do you think needs to change to address that?
First of all, I think the role of women is changing in society. Let me say, the slowing or reduction of the births. Why it's happening? Probably one of the reasons is just because there's somehow a lack of hope in the future. There's all the structural problems we see every day, all what is happening to the planet today. I think that it's the role of women, which I think are becoming more aware about the fact that they would like to have their own life course, of which not necessarily means having children, while in previous society it was kind of a mechanical flow, right? So if you see the data, it's quite dramatic how this thing is dropping. But also you see some solutions. So there are countries, South Korea is one of the most challenged in birth rate. I think it's under 1, so I think it's 0.9 or 8. But for the first time in 9 years, there is a kind of a bouncing back from the bottom up. And it's due to a combination of, let me say, more traditional political measures, but also how private companies are literally supporting women for having children, to having children, women and men. So it's also a matter of understanding how this could be a far more, I would say, interconnected discussion between the genders and not necessarily on one side. And the private players might play a crucial role in inverting this negative trend.
Julianne, there's some of the things that Nick said there. These are sort of slow set of changes. I mean, there's policies that are being introduced around the world that are beginning to put those changes into train. I'm interested kind of how some of those dynamics might affect or impact how savings and finance work more generally, because I know this is an area that you've been looking very closely at.
It's huge. It's multifaceted in terms of the rising longevity risk to individuals, pension providers and governments in terms of savings. Investments will fundamentally need to last for much, much longer. So we really need to think about, from the assumptions made around annuities and potentially leading to higher funding requirements, but also how we invest and, broadening the opportunity set to include asset classes such as private assets and, higher equity exposure well into retirement to maintain that capital base, sort of protect from inflation, but also grow the capital base well into retirement and deliver income, from a lifestyle perspective.
Katie, I'm just to turn to you quickly, because you're sort of in the engine room of the financial sector, if you like. What changes are you seeing relating to this big structural shift?
So I think picking up on one of the points that Julianne made there is this shift that we're seeing around who is actually taking responsibility for this long-term saving. So we've seen the shift in certain parts of the world from DB to DC.
Defined benefit to defined contribution.
Exactly, with the corporate or your employer taking responsibility and risk for the long-term savings to the individual. We're seeing governments step back in terms of how much state support they can provide. And actually what this means is the onus on that long-term saving and that planning for your life and what you want your life to be is very much being focused on the individual. And that's a trend we see globally. It's happening at different speeds in different places. And then you layer what does your post-work or post-retirement lifestyle look like from an investment perspective? But it's individuals that are having to make those choices and to think about this time frame that none of us have quite got our heads around yet, and a lifestyle that we also don't know what we want it to look like.
Because it is a significant jump, isn't it? From, we're now looking at potentially 20, maybe 30 years, not dissimilar to the time we might have spent in work for our life, and having to plan for that does take a complete sort of mind shift.
In financial services, I think we probably underestimate that sort of psychological shift from working life where you have a monthly budget, you roughly know what your spending looks like, you know what your lifestyle looks like, and each month some more money is going to come in, to a world where you have, in effect, a single pot of money that has to last you for an ill-defined period of time that you don't know what it's going to look like. And you don't have a sense of a budget, and it's probably not going to have extra money coming in should you need it. And I think that's something that we underestimate, the impact of that in terms of people then engaging with the decisions that they need to make at different points in their life, because there's just this big psychological shift that blocks them from thinking about all the other things that are really important once we start thinking about investment solutions and financial solutions. And Nick, it's a really interesting. I'd be really interested in your view around that, and whether there are, you mentioned career in terms of some of the policy changes they're making, but also this sort of psychological shift as you go into these different life stages?
Yes, I think life stages is the right word. We tended to frame people in generations. It's pretty young as a framing because it's from the mid-90s. And then we have used it as a kind of a box on how we just put some million, trillion people thinks they behave the same, but they're individuals in those billions. And it's the life stages are also changes.
And have you got some examples of places in the world, other governments that are already making steps in the right direction to help support their populations in this? Where do you
say
look at?
China, I think it's the biggest example we can talk about. Yes, China, compared to other countries, is not yet in the dependency ratio like many other countries, Japan, Italy first, for example, or UK. But they already have 220 million of people over 60. So the magnitude is visible, is there. So they're obliged to invent new solutions, and they're doing it. So my suggestion is always to look what China is doing in terms of aging. And they're doing a lot of good work, in my opinion, on how they are helping people to be reskilled in the different stages of life, which is something obvious on one hand, but it's driven by the government on that side. So I think that if we look how they're just doing it, I think they're doing it for the benefit of the economy of the enterprise, the economy of the country, but also the well-being of the individual, which feels included in what's going to be the future society, which is so important.
One place that obviously has already been through this experience of a sharply aging population is Japan. And actually, I spoke to Salman about this and whether there were lessons to be learned from that country for the wave of economies that are heading in the same direction.
A lot of debate about whether this, that leads to more inflation or not. And Japan example has been an interesting one where we saw deflation. So the supply side dominated the demand side factors. But I think what is different between the example of Japan and the rest and the one we are going to experience at a global level going forward is that Japan aging was happening in an isolation. Whilst when you have global aging, especially across the DM world, that may change the demand side as well. So we are in the camp that inflationary impulse may become important here, especially if pension age, retirement age is not increased. And you have a big influx of retirees coming through, and then you have obviously longevity there, and then some parts of the consumption basket means that you have more demand. So that adds to our inflation story, although it may not be the only one. It's a more slower moving shock, but it adds to that inflationary impulse into the system.
So someone there on some of those big systemic challenges that economies face. But down at the micro level, what's happening on the ground? Nick, what does the new research that you've done with Fidelity tell us about what people are worrying about?
Well, first of all, I think it's one of the very first broad research about understanding what are the drivers and the desires and the fears of the future of people. So over 15 countries, it's 12,000 people, which gives a lot of interesting nuances and differences. But I think there's some, let me say, louder numbers coming out. For sure, one, it's that we tend not to be prepared. Prepared, I think it's the other keyword that came out. What is interesting is that the intersections between preparedness. And it came out clearly that the financial preparedness, it's the pillar on top of which you empower dimensions that, again, from, let me say, financial institution, we might tend to not see or forget or give as a priority. The physical preparedness, the mental preparedness, and the societal preparedness. These are the three things that happen to us in life. I try to give it from this perspective. It's us, it's humans, and then we behave that way. But it came out clearly that if you don't have a financial background, if you don't have a financial preparedness, all the physical, the mental, and the societal are a lot weaker. So the infrastructure is a lot weaker, meaning that you are less prepared to face what could happen to your body over time. You're less prepared to be ready to cope with the challenges that will happen over time. And I think one of the core elements, you're less prepared to have a network of people that can support you.
And actually, just coming back to what Salman said, Katie, one of the big challenges that people are going to have in preserving these finite pots, as you put it earlier, is going to be managing those against these likely inflationary backdrops. Are you seeing people pay heed to that in their retirement planning yet?
I mean, inflation's definitely important when we think about designing solutions for people in retirement, or indeed through into retirement. But inflation's quite a difficult concept for people to get their heads round outside financial services. I think, we're all aware that prices have gone up in supermarkets and bills, but again, thinking about what's the value of my pound now and what it buys me now versus what it might buy me in 10 years' time or 20 years' time is actually really hard for people to think about. And actually it is significant. The changes can be really significant in that purchasing power, if you like. So it is quite a difficult concept for people to think about. I think, Nick's point around this changing the definition of retirement and that route into from work as we define it, being in the office and earning money, to what does work look like and what does that then look like in retirement, is also something else that people are starting to think about, but again, haven't quite got their heads around. And so thinking about that hard target of I am 67 and therefore I am now going to stop working and start, traveling or doing jigsaw puzzles or whatever it is that people want to do in their retirement. Again, I think that's a concept that people also don't quite get to. And of course, your choices, by the time you get to the point at which you're looking to make a lifestyle change, are informed by what you've done much, much earlier in your saving life or your financial preparedness. We understand these concepts and we talk in language of inflation and macroeconomics and risk and returns. We have to find the right way for that to resonate with the people that are going to make these choices and are going to make these investments as they go through.
And make the money work, which is, Julianne, I suppose I'll come to you then on that, because one of the things that obviously has surfaced in this conversation is around when you're into that period of retirement, predictability is sort of such a core part of sort of well-being and making the most out of those years in front of you. So how do you as a portfolio manager approach the challenge of stabilizing those cash flows and providing that income?
When we actually are looking at this and thinking about this, it is the stability, it is the predictability of return that we're talking about, that we're seeking. And it's the stability in terms of both the level of income and the risk that we're taking. As we mentioned earlier, we are extending the life of pensions in many areas by investing in risk assets well into retirement. And I think, that is providing some capital growth in terms of protecting from inflation, as we talk about, but also allocating to yielding assets to generate a sort of a steady level of income alongside that as well. And it differs by jurisdiction. So in the UK, we might be investing up to 30% in equities in a retirement fund at this point. In Germany, where there are still some corporate guarantees on defined contribution pensions, they may glide to 100% cash. But that is starting to change. We're starting to see a shift towards investing in risk assets well into retirement. And there's also the other consideration is the risk. And risk is could be quite a scary word if you're not familiar with how investments work. And we really think about this in terms of optimizing the risk return profile. So, for example, whether we focus just on a natural level of income for distribution, so people just live on the fixed income coupons or equity dividends, or whether we take a total return approach, thereby really maximising the return that we can generate within the portfolio from as diversified a range of assets as possible in a sort of a risk managed way.
30% in risk assets as you approach retirement, and that is quite a mind shift in itself, is it not, Katie?
And I think this is where the longevity challenge really meets the sort of financial challenge, because if to your point, your time in retirement, however we're defining that, is as long as your time in working life, you need to be taking a degree of risk because you want your assets to continue to grow. Now, grow with the right level of certainty, predictability around them, which means the shape of them looks different, but you absolutely need assets in there that are going to deliver that long-term growth, because that creates the optionality and choice for what your next 30 years looks like and what you want to do with those 30 years. And again, that's such an individual thing, which means a single answer to this question, unfortunately for us in financial services, is just not possible.
That all makes a lot of sense and very constructive. But there is real disruption here, isn't there? And uncertainty at both ends of the scale for individuals and for economies, governments, and so on. Here's a final clip from Salman with that macro perspective and perhaps some light at the end of the tunnel.
There are many multiple mega trends in play, and obviously demographics is clearly one of them. It is going to become more important, as we have been discussing, because of the wider application of AI and automation, robotics, and immigration policy changes. But then you have other mega trends of climate change, resource allocation, resource availability will also get affected at a time when populations are still growing. All those mega forces will have to come into play. That has political implications, social implications. The positive side is technologies. In the history of mankind, technology has been our get out of jail card.
Julianne, I think we all accept technology is going to play a major role in whatever shape or form it takes in this new era. How does it feature in the investment themes that you're looking at?
So the most obvious area is connectivity. And we know that's really important for longevity in terms of emotional, social and digital connectedness. It's got it's a really strong predictor of a long life and healthy aging, and it's measurable in terms of biological mechanisms. So stress regulation, immune function. There's measurable ways of seeing connectedness there. It really changes our biology, and there are plenty of connected investments in the industry, in the market. If we think about what's actually driving global markets at the moment, it is technology, and within that mix, there's a huge focus on connectedness or connectivity. Within healthcare, which is probably one of the most obvious areas of focus for longevity, we are seeing increasing use of technology. So machine learning is for many, many years now in terms of identifying novel compounds that are coming to market for an increasing sort of broader range of therapeutic areas. So far more efficient identification of drugs within the pharmaceutical industry. And within healthcare, we're focusing on regenerative medicine as well as diagnostics, hugely important in terms of through life healthcare. And then within lifestyle, it's far more diverse in terms of what we can go for there, but also more challenging. So there are challenging in terms of the investability of some of the ideas. So certain wellness consumer trends, so gyms, supplements, holistic travel, things like that, far harder to access from an investment perspective. Where there's huge opportunities, obviously, the older population who are far more willing to buy services and products that are enriching their lifestyles, and that growing demographic and the growing consumer opportunity that we have there. One specific area is pets. I'm going to steal a term from Nick here in terms of petgevity, which we love within our team. Just the growing evidence that pets play a meaningful role in supporting longer, healthier lives. It's not just about the physical exercise, so that the regular walking, the mental well-being in terms of companionship and emotional support, but also that social connectedness as well. The pets acting as a social catalyst, all of which key determinants for a longer health span or longer lifespan.
And I suppose that's also about keeping pets healthy and living longer
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah. So, and we can invest in pet health companies.
I think it's time to now start drawing things to a close. And Katie, perhaps we come back to our original question around how we should be thinking about investing with aging populations. What are your sort of key takeaways from the conversation today?
I mean, we've touched on so many areas, and I think, longevity, we're only just starting to think about what is the actual definition of longevity. Certainly in financial services, we tend to think about going from accumulation to decumulation, and I think what we've talked about here is actually we need to redefine that whole shift around what is work, what is retirement, and find the right investment solutions to support that whole journey for individuals, but also for corporates, for governance. This is a very integrated system, as Nick has talked about, but ultimately it's about think about it early, think about it again, and think about it again, and keep planning, because that's where we'll go, both for us as the providers of these sorts of solutions to support people, but also for the individuals and the corporates who are both investing in them but making them available to their employees. Is these things will change over time because we don't know what the future is going to look like. So that planning, think about it now, think about it again tomorrow, keep checking in. And then you have the optionality and choice as time moves forward.
Right. Well, before I let you all go, we are going to play hot cakes and hot potatoes with longevity in mind, of course. So what sort of businesses or investments are you buying like hot cakes? And what are you dropping like a hot potato? So Julianne, let's come to you first for your hot cakes and hot potatoes on the investment side.
So hot cakes, I think the stars are aligning in terms of real assets that are supporting energy transition. So if we think about that, that's the strong structural growth, demand over the long term, combined with near-term supportive supply-demand dynamics, but then from a top-down perspective, some inflation protection within portfolios. So what I mean by real assets is the sort of copper, the rare earths, those sort of materials that are really supporting transition.
And your hot potato?
I'm struggling here. From a longevity perspective, I mean, there are areas, so maybe, hot potato cakes rather than hot potatoes. I mean, AI, there's no doubt that the AI transition is here with us, but, and we really like the sort of the companies that are benefiting from this huge capex spend in building out the AI technology stack. There's, the rally has been incredibly strong, and we're monitoring that. It's whether it has, it is reaching bubble territory. I don't think we are quite there yet, but it's something that we're monitoring. So it's watching whether that hot cake becomes a hot potato more than anything. And then I think also healthcare, where it's been sort of unloved for quite some time now, sort of overhang of geopolitics, as well as patent cliff, has weighed heavily on the sector. It's incredibly attractive from a valuation perspective in some areas, and it's whether that sort of emerges from being a bit of a hot potato.
Very good. Katie, hot cakes and hot potatoes, perhaps styles of investing?
In terms of the hot potato, I guess, so say goodbye to the old way of we take our equity fund and we combine it with our bond fund, and there we are happy forever. And as we step through our life, we just have a slightly higher exposure to bonds. I think those days have gone. And if I pick up on Julianne's point around, diversification looks different, and we do need to think about more different types of asset classes, whether that's private assets, but also I think even in the traditional liquid asset classes, just investing differently, because some of these new ideas that are coming through that are going to drive the capital growth of the future are small now, and they're not necessarily represented in standard indices in the way that perhaps investors may want to take it. So just thinking differently around your diversification and where you're putting your money to work, and leaning more into some of these themes which may be harder to access from some of the traditional places where we've tended to go.
Finally, Nick, hotcakes and hot potatoes for yourself.
I start from the potato, and the potato is ageism. I think it's time that we really move forward of the discrimination around age. It's so harder to remove because it's part of the culture. The hot cakes could be many, honestly, but there's at least a couple. The first one is we have established what we have defined as a Republic of Longevity, which is on stage right now in an exhibition in Milan, in Italy. And it's just a provocation to suggest the core mission of each government or public entity. Goes back to Cicero, it's salus populi suprema lex exto, which means the welfare of the population should be the highest law, which is obvious, right? But sometimes I guess we forgot. So can we reinstate this principle in every layer of whatever political institution, meaning that whatever you do, end of the day, it's for your good, it's for your well-being. It could be in a financial institution or an entity that cares about transportation or agriculture, whatever, should have to have that, last mission. Meaning that, it gives me to my second cake, how togetherness somehow should be an approach that I think we should have to take from several perspectives. So there's idea also of very individual things that are close to your health and then to your longevity that can be shared with others, can be part of a far more social type of approach.
Thank you, Nick. Well, that is all we have time for. Thank you to Katie Roberts for bringing some of her day's job smarts to the room, and to our guests for their abundance of ideas, Nick Palmarini from the National Innovation Centre for Ageing, and portfolio manager Julianne Ashcroft, and to our global head of macro and strategic asset allocation, Salman Ahmed, for the big picture of how the economics will play out. And if you're interested in that, then you can hear more on an extended interview with Salman on a bonus episode this month. You can find out more on the topics we've discussed today on your local Fidelity website or at fidelityinternational.com. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share and subscribe. The producers today were Rachel Reed and Patrick Graham, with production support from Connor Bailey and Alex Wilcox. For now, from all of us at Fidelity, goodbye.